Welcome back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys are doing very well at home. Welcome to Top 4. Is it something else that might begin with a T? You let me know. Joining me today, Joe Tomlinson. How you doing?
Woo. Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you? Very good. Very, very good. Thank you. Doogie Critchley is opposite us.
Great to be back. Great to be back on this channel.
And Michael McCubbin. Bit of a regular now.
Yeah.
Bit of a regular here.
I'm there.
On the ZD
part of the
football
furniture
channel.
ZD.
ZD. Yeah, I'm not American.
ZD.
I'm not American. It's a good point, well made. As you can tell by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about a bunch of Premier League players. Are they good? Are they not? Are they flops? Are they successes? Well, without further ado, let's kick things off. Now, just before we get into the debate, guys, I need to talk about something. They're in the room with us, and of course, it's Huel Black Edition powder. It's been a huge staple in my life at the moment, and honestly, I cannot recommend it enough. It's a proper meal that takes only 30 seconds to make. It's packed with 40 grams of protein, low in sugar, and completely plant-based. Whether I'm prepping for these debates or talking about the latest transfer news, whatever it might be in the football world, honestly, I don't have all the time in the world to make dinner or lunch, whatever it might be, and so this has been a lifesaver. It's reliable, keeps you going whilst on the go, and to be honest, this flavour, cookies and cream, I mean, whenever that's in any flavour, it's my favourite, but is genuinely one of my favourite things I can have during the day. And to be honest, the fact that it can taste that good and be super nutritional as well is such a huge benefit. It's also great value at £1.68 a meal. Now, if you guys at home want to give it a go, then make sure you use my link in the description or scan the QR code right now. Use the code ZachHuel and you'll get £10 off your first order and some free gifts as well. What's not to love? Thank you so much to the guys over at Huel for making this video possible. It wouldn't have happened without them. So let's get on with the debate. As well, guys at home, you can see there's no judge. You guys are the judge. After the video or in the comment section, there will be all of our names. You guys have to like who you think did best today in debating their points. If you agree with them, whatever, like it down there. Okay, the first one, guys, is going to be a flop or not. Pedro Neto at Chelsea.
Ooh.
Big money signing.
Ooh. Where's Patrick Van Straten when you need him?
Tough one for you, Zach. Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, it's a drawing of Sebastian Larsen I did before we started.
3, 2, 1.
Ooh.
Flop, flop, not.
It's an even split. It's an even
Not.
split.
No.
Oh, here we go.
Doogie, kick it off.
I don't think it's a big flop. It's not an absolute disaster of a signing, but I think it's difficult to argue it's been a real success. Chelsea obviously prioritised a lot of wing talent in the summer, bringing in Pedro Neto, Sancho, etc. They still didn't bring in that elite goalkeeper they so clearly need. They didn't bring in a experienced backup number 9 that they so clearly need. So that I think it's about £54 million that they spent on Pedro Neto, I think could have been better spent. I think he got off to a reasonable start, but his numbers have slightly dipped towards the second half of the season. Look, I don't think he's a disaster. I don't think he's a bad player necessarily, but could those funds have been better allocated? Yeah.
I think it's harsh to talk about Pedro Neto in the guise of Chelsea's wider transfer business personally, because he can't affect that at all. And I also think it's kind of harsh to judge him just on this one season, right? Like, I know that he hasn't put up huge numbers, but I think he's been asked to play a variety of different roles. I mean, at the moment, he's kind of playing as this sort of number 9, which is definitely not really his game, and he can't pick and choose where he wants to play, can he? So I think to some level, hasn't been totally utilised to his absolute best. But I think the best is still to come from Pedro Neto. I know that he has been a bit hit and miss this season. I still think there are moments in his game where I think the guy could go to an extremely high level.
I tend to agree. Because also with someone like Pedro Neto, I don't know if Maresca is using him exactly how he should be used. Like, he is a touchline winger, really. You want him almost driving at people. You want him playing in behind. I always think if you actually look at some of Chelsea's best goals this season, it's come from Pedro Neto using his pace and getting into that wing, into the wing. More specifically, like the Newcastle one, where Palmer plays that ball over, being able to do that. And to be fair, but with the way Maresca wants to play and having high possession, not kind of wanting to play in the break, I think that makes it quite hard.
But this is the problem, right? Like, Joe, you speak about him being used in a number of different positions. You talk about Maresca not using him correctly. As long as Maresca is at Chelsea, can you see Pedro Neto actually being a success and living up to his £60 million price tag? Like, I'm sceptical, to say the least.
I think that's where it depends on the player, right? Like, this is he's still not necessarily, he's not like a 21-year-old, of course not. He's a little bit older than that. He is maybe a couple of years away from his prime ages, but that is on him developing into a guy that isn't just someone for playing the ball over the top, for being someone where we are playing on high turnovers and trying to get it on the counter-attack. It is up to him to basically become somebody who can, when they are having a 60% possession or even at times 70% possession, being able to make something out of nothing. Because at the moment, you look at that Chelsea side and it is really just like, what can Palmer do for us here?
I think the big
I
question...
just don't know if that's his game, though, isn't it? It's kind of like the onus is always on Palmer to make things happen. Neto was that guy at Wolves, and I don't know. Like I think it's a difficult one, especially when Chelsea are going to be spending more money on wingers this summer, like Estevao coming in. Maybe at least another winger coming in as well. At least if rumours are to be believed.
Well, they bought Kenda.
How many more opportunities is Neto realistically going to have? Like, we've seen what happened to Mudryk after an underwhelming first season at Chelsea. Like, he's completely out of the picture now. Wonder what's going to happen with Jadon Sancho.
Rather than Chelsea.
But I just think I have less and less faith in Chelsea getting the most out of their wingers, like given what we've seen in the last 2-3 years. Like that's partly why I think that 60 million on Neto. Also given his injury issues as well. I know they've not been as bad at Chelsea as they were at Wolves, but I just think it's a lot of money to bank on him. I know that's quoting, what Patrick Van Straten's been saying for the last 6 months, but it is a valid point, I think.
Would you not say though that essentially he has been quite hurt because of the fact that like Chelsea now in the last 2 months had a really, really down period, right? And that is without a striker in any shape or form. Like, okay, Nkunku's not been played there, but there isn't anybody to play there. He's then had to do a job. And I actually think from Chelsea's attack has probably been the better player out of anyone else so far. I think he's not been able to kind of have a fullback properly helping him, which I think would help him benefit, or he'd benefit a lot, again, from Maresca's system.
I think he was the second most expensive transfer of the summer behind Dominic Solanke. So there is a certain amount of expectations there. And I think Mikey's right in terms of it's very difficult to imagine the current environment being that positive for any Chelsea attacker, because you look at Madueke, he was one of the stars of the sort of September-October period. People were sort of seeing him as the sort of second guy in that Chelsea attack. He has a bad few months, and now Chelsea fans online are calling for him to leave. Like it doesn't feel like there's very much patience at that club whatsoever. But I just think if you're not calling Pedro Neto a flop, I don't think you can call many of these other players a flop, because he was one of the most expensive, and I don't think he's delivered enough on a consistent basis for a side that probably should be better than they are.
And also you have to consider that it's not like you've signed Pedro Neto. He's older than when you signed Mudryk. Like he's not Pedro Neto of 2021, where it's like, oh well, there's 5 years, he's going to be at his peak in 5 years. Like Pedro Neto really is, for a modern winger, like approaching his peak years now. He's the same age as someone like Phil Foden, right? He's like 20, is he 24 now? Like he's not super young for a winger, and yes, like had a lot of time out of the game with injuries, so maybe he'll be able to last a little bit longer if he can keep his fitness up. But yeah, you kind of signed him to deliver now, and ultimately it will come down to, do Chelsea qualify for the Champions League? If you don't, then I think it's an absolute flop, because he was the most, invested the most money in him for what Chelsea have invested in players in general over the last 2 years. Champions League qualification needs to be a minimum this season, really. I mean, you could say it for all their business, but he was the marquee signing last summer.
Preach.
Our next one for flop or not, Yoro. 3, 2, 1.
Oh,
Really,
3
Zach?
on 1.
I think
Someone had to say it, didn't
I'm
they?
being harsh. I also know I'm being harsh. However, I guess the biggest critical point with him is United have spent some of the best centre back in the league money on someone who is super young, who we've seen have injuries already, and we don't know if he was quite cut out to become that. Like, he is this very, very young centre back who has a huge future ahead of him. Like, the potential there is very high, but United have spent the money on potential. No guarantees that this happens. And I think there's been some games this season where I thought he's looked quite poor.
In a poor side.
He has, in a poor side, and then to be fair, in a system where he's had to do a bit of a
18.
makeshift job, for sure. But just because he's 18 doesn't mean he's going to fulfill this potential of being someone that
This is like an argument you'd make for Chelsea spending that money on Pedro Neto when he was 18, right? at least there is the potential that in a few years he could be one of the best centre-backs in his age. Well, he is still probably, skill-wise, one of the best centre-backs for his age in Europe. I think that the one thing I would say is that, you compare the money spent on Yoro to the money spent on Aiden Heaven, and right now there doesn't seem to be that much between them. But I think that's just more. I think that's more of a comment on how good Heaven is for the price that United paid for him. Like Yoro was probably going to go for that money to someone like Real Madrid if he hadn't gone to United. So I think Yoro was always going to command that bigger fee.
But United, they are in a financial mess, essentially. They don't have the budget to go and bring in that many players, and they've put a lot of it on this one guy who is 18 and could, as I mentioned, has potential to be very, very good. But he isn't at the moment. And United's defence is a mess. United's squad at the time is a mess. There's going to be a lot of makeshift moves.
United's defensive record is good this season.
I'd also
say it's better under Amorim at least.
They're in quite a good position in terms of centre-backs as well. Like having Djellab, having Heaven, having Yoro to take through this era when Evans and Maguire and Lindelof
all move on. Yeah,
well, exactly. But at least they've got one of the most promising centre-backs in Europe. And he got injured in his second game of pre-season. That is a brutal scenario for any new signing, particularly when you're joining the club which hoovers up more headlines than any other in English football, the biggest in England. It's an almost impossible situation to get injured in your second game and still expect you to be a big success when there's a change of manager in November as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's brutal to call it a flop.
One thing I would say from Zach's point of view, even though I'm saying this is not, there is the argument that, given the resources that United have, could, at least in terms of this season, could they have used some of that they spent on Yoro to shore up the midfield a little bit more? That's one place that United really don't have quality depth and have struggled massively this season. But then at the same time,
if we were going into the season if we didn't have the centre-back numbers, playing that back three, we'd have been
But you're going into next season. You're going into next season with
one of the best young centre-backs in European football.
Yeah, okay. I mean, sure, but from last season, this season, he's not one of the best young centre backs in football.
No,
at all.
But he's not.
And you're going into it with,
because he's been injured.
Of course. But then you're going into next season with Harry Maguire, who's probably been him or Djellab being your best centre backs. So this season, and then Heaven and Yoro for next season.
It's not bad.
We're going to be in
Martinez as well.
But one gets injured.
Well, Lisandro Martinez comes back.
I guess Lisandro Martinez is there as well. But again, he's not like
Mazraoui.
Mazraoui
will be a right centre back in this system.
United look okay.
It has depth, but the point being is that I think this is someone who
you can't label United's centre back depth as an issue with Leny Yoro's transfer. Leny Yoro's transfer as a whole, because he's so young, arrived injured and has played all right when he's been, in the side. I know that he's had a couple of standout moments, i.e. the Southampton game where he had a bad day. That will happen with 18-year-olds. United have taken this transfer based on his future level they believe he can get to, not what he can deliver in the first 8 months of his time at the club. So to call him a flop and then say Pedro Neto is not a flop, who's 24 years old and has come in for the same amount of money, or maybe even a little bit more than Yoro, I think is quite a confusing stance.
Well, I mean, Pedro Neto, I'm never calling him a flop, am I, guys? Okay, that's fair enough. We're going to Arsenal for this one. Merino.
I will admit this is really harsh.
No, I don't think so. Flop, not.
Come on, guys.
Okay. It is harsh. Okay. That is really harsh from me, I must admit.
No, but we have spoken.
I think there's an argument.
Mikey, 2 weeks ago on this channel, or 3 weeks ago, we did all unanimously agree with Pat as well, actually, that it was. Well, we had to say whether it was a good or bad transfer. I would argue. I don't know if he's a flop, but I don't think it's been a good transfer.
He was fairly cheap. He again got injured very early on.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no future for him though. We can't talk about him in the future.
Well, he has to be. He's 28.
Essentially, did Arsenal win the Premier League this year?
No, but is that all on Mikel Merino?
I don't think it's not all on Merino.
Is Merino in their best 11?
No, probably not as well. But they're about to lose Jorginho. They're about to lose Partey. He's a good squad player to have for relatively cheap. He can play a variety of positions.
For sure, but
he's amazing in the air. He scores some good goals. But it's not a disaster.
When you had Pedro Neto as not, he's outscored Pedro Neto this season.
Okay, yeah,
from midfield.
We're not talking about Pedro Neto.
We're not talking about Pedro Neto. 28 million pounds, something like that.
100%. But we came into this season of him having a very good Euros as well, and I actually think a lot of people are saying he's the left centre mid for Arsenal. He's going to be the guy that plays left centre mid. We'll play Declan Rice at DM and Odegaard at attacking midfielder. what's happened now, he's not in their best 11, right? And essentially, if it's not like he's a youngster where we can look at him for the future and think like, this is somebody that's going to be here in 5 years' time and have a huge impact for Arsenal, not just now, but later on as well. Okay, they didn't pay £60 million for him, but they did pay 30 odd, roughly. And he's not had the impact they want.
But I think there is an argument to be made that I understand he's not the starter this season, but I don't think that's all down to Mikel Merino's form. I think Thomas Partey has actually outperformed the level a lot of people thought he would put out this season. You know, he's had a surprisingly good campaign. Declan Rice's position maybe hasn't developed in the way people thought he would in becoming this sort of box-crashing number 8. I think if you asked a lot of Arsenal fans now, they would say, actually, we prefer him a little bit deeper in that number 6 role, and I think that probably has affected Mikel Merino's transition into this first 11. I don't think that is a stick to beat Mikel Merino with, who came in, like Duke said, had that major injury straight away. For me, he's been £30 million squad player. Arsenal didn't get their summer transfer business around.
For a squad player is a lot of money.
Is it?
Is it in the modern market? I'm not sure it is for a player who's come in
on their 25th man in their
but that's Chelsea. Chelsea are insane.
I don't think £30 million on a squad player.
I think Arsenal's midfield options don't look too bad for next year. If they sign a Zubimendi, if they get a more passing midfielder in there, maybe like an Angelo Steeler or something, and Mikel Merino is picking up minutes that Jorginho would have this year.
If Kai Havertz didn't get injured, we wouldn't have seen him in the last 3 months.
I think it's easy to say that, but the utilisation of Mikel Merino has changed because of Kai Havertz's injury. We might be saying, oh, actually, he's found a role in midfield, but he's not been able to play in midfield because he's been asked to play in a different role and cover for the team. I think the fact that he is that versatile to do that is a string to his bow. The fact that he's been able to come in and play in that number 9 role, score 4 or 5 goals, is fine.
Yeah, I would say on the player, to be fair.
A nice plus to be like a kind of okay striker.
A big plus.
He's not even that great of a striker. Let's be honest.
No, but he's scored some crucial goals.
He's just a big guy. He's a big guy they put top.
2-3 weeks ago, Arsenal fans were worried about finishing the top 4. They now look secure in the top 4, which is massive for them. They could not exit the top 4 this year.
Definitely.
And Mikel Merino's goals have been fairly crucial to that. For a £30 million signing, I just don't think you can call it a flop.
Would it maybe have been a better idea to spend that £30 million on a striker?
Yeah, absolutely. But 30
what
million
striker are you getting for 30 mil?
Who does that buy you?
But it could have gone towards. It could have been 30 million that had gone towards a striker or even just a forward. I do think like the forward line was clearly where Arsenal needed to be.
I think we're getting into the plane of we did it with Neto as well, saying that, or we did it with Yoro too, that because they've signed one player, like that's made them unable to sign one, so we have to then label him a flop. It's nothing to do with Merino. It's nothing to do with his actual performance for Arsenal.
It's not to do with Merino, but given that Arteta, especially immediately after he came back from injury, wasn't able to utilise Merino, and it's a bit like with Pedro Neto. It's like it feels like the squad planning. I
think we can all agree that the squad planning wasn't perfect.
Of all the summer signings, though, I'd rather argue that Calafiori was a flop. I'd rather argue that Raheem Sterling was a flop. Like, they didn't need Calafiori as much as they needed Mikel Merino. They've already got Jakub Kiwior, Zinchenko, obviously Tomiyasu got injured.
I think
Lars
Skelly
emerged, obviously. Right, they couldn't have planned that. Yeah. But did they need Calafiori less so than Merino, in my opinion?
Interesting.
Well, I don't know.
You guys at home, let us know in the comments below. Overrated or underrated? Phil Foden.
If we're talking right now at this moment in time, with the narrative that's going around, I've got to argue this.
3, 2, 1.
Ooh,
the only over.
Who'd have thought this, having read the Football Daily group chat over the last year? I would be saying this. It's an interesting time to ask it, isn't it? Because obviously his reputation's probably the lowest it's been since his debut. And he's having the most difficult season of his career as well. But just listening to Gary Neville on the Overlap this week, still saying that he should be a starter and effectively saying you need to build a team around him, I still think he's overrated by a lot of people in the wider public. At the moment, if I had a 26-man World Cup squad, he's in it, but he's one of the last people in it on current form. And at the moment, you're building that team around Palmer, Bellingham, Saka, Kane. I'm not sure he's a guaranteed starter in any position.
No.
And he's had a really, really difficult season. People have been very harsh on him, but at the same time, Man City have won, 6 of the last 7 league titles. He's peak age, and a lot of their players are aging. This was supposed to be, he's just been named PFA Player of the Year where he kind of carries City for the first time, and he's kind of gone missing.
I think it's a lot down to narrative here, isn't it? And at the moment, I think the narrative is swinging too far in the opposite direction about Phil Foden. There is a narrative now that he's not at that elite level, and I think he's proved that he is at that elite level. I think, over the years, this would have been, some quarters think of this. I think if you asked the everyday man on the street at the moment, some people would say he's bad. And it's like, oh, come on. I know that he's out of form and he's not had a good season, but come on.
I think it's a lot also to do with the fact that England have a ton of quite good players in that position playing for clubs who are overperforming this season. And so people are like, oh, well, yeah, Gibbs White is obviously better than Phil Foden. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. Gibbs White has had an amazing 2 years at Nottingham Forest. But Phil Foden at 24 has an amazing back catalogue in terms of his career. And I don't agree with Gary Neville that he should just automatically start whatever happens, but I kind of think that he should automatically be picked in a squad, because Phil Foden as the backup to Cole Palmer in the 10. I mean, I don't know how many. I don't think any country has a backup number 10 as quality as Phil Foden. And going to the World Cup with Phil Foden as your backup number 10, I'm sorry, that is just a must. That is an absolute must. And if that means that a player who's in amazing form in the Premier League doesn't get the nod, then I think so be it. Because his track record is that good. The last 5-6 years, Phil Foden has excelled. And also, yes, I know it's in a Pep team. He's been coached by Pep for 6 years. And we've got Thomas Tuchel, who's also one of the elite managers in world football, taking England to the World Cup for hopefully, if England would qualify, which they probably will.
I mean, they should.
That is invaluable. I'm sorry. Having a player who's been coached by Pep to then be coached by Tuchel at a World Cup, I think that does set him apart from someone who's been coached by Nuno and Steve Cooper for the last 2 years. Or even, Morgan Rogers has been also coached by a more elite coach in Nuno Emery. So I think there's a bit more of an argument there. But also slightly different kinds of players. I think they can probably both go on the plane. In fact, I
still think he's got to earn his place on that plane. I know that
he does, but he will though, won't he? In a year, in the next 12 months, I think he will. I can't see Phil Foden's stock dropping any lower than it currently is. I feel like it's at an absolute no right now, and that's why I'm saying underrated. Like you say, in another season, I think it's a bit more I don't know. It's a bit more wishy-washy. But right now, he is at his lowest ebb, and it's sent people insane. People are suddenly and I think it's partly due to the fact that Phil Foden maybe got away with it a little bit at the Euros last year, where I think Jude Bellingham came in for way too much criticism, given that he literally bailed us out and kept us in the tournament. Foden got a fair amount, but not in quite the same way. But I think people over-egged it a little bit.
On the left.
I think people over-egged it a little bit. There was a narrative that was going around that people are saying that Saka should change position because of Foden. No, people were saying that Saka should change position because we literally didn't have a left back, and Saka was the only actually was probably the best option there. But obviously his best position is right wing, so he shouldn't be moved from there. But it was nothing to do with Foden. People I think people went a bit insane over that. But I think all of this is now built up to this quite toxic moment for Phil Foden, where people have suddenly completely written him off, and that's obviously not the case.
I agree. I think you basically covered it all.
Yes.
There's not much
sorry, Zach. I just didn't let you get a word in there.
Cole Palmer.
Oh, okay.
Is he overrated or underrated? 3, 2, 1.
Oh, we all said under.
But I think you're only saying, we're saying under because you can't say overrated. I think everybody just rates him. He's just an absolutely awesome player to watch. His numbers, his output is absolutely insane. He's at an age where he's only going to get better, and he's playing in a team that are pretty mediocre at times. So I think people just rate him as he should be rated, pretty much, with Cole.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a lot more stick for him this year than last.
He's had to take on a lot more stick because his team isn't doing so well, even though his underlying numbers are very good. And also there's this kind of narrative that he doesn't turn up in big games. It's he literally scored in the Euros final. And it's also he's only really a year and a half into his Chelsea career,
into his senior career.
It's his senior career. The sheer amount of output that this guy has had, the whole doesn't turn up in big games thing is I think it's a bit stupid, to be honest. There are so many amazing strikers over the years who've scored massive amount of goals, and didn't, like what's like Mo
Thierry
Salah?
Henry won the final, wasn't it?
What's Mo Salah's record in major finals? Not
Yeah, not
particularly
amazing.
good. Like the guy is one of the best players in Premier League history, and Cole Palmer, like he shouldn't even have the burden of goal scoring at Chelsea. Like there should be wingers and a striker in front of him who take some of that burden off him. Like Cole Palmer's had to take on so much more than he should have in this Chelsea side. He's like honestly has overperformed in the last 2 years.
Is Jadon Sancho underrated or overrated?
I don't think he's over or under. I don't even think it's at the stage where people are having conversations about Jadon Sancho. Like, I think if you ask the everyday man in the street,
this week?
He's getting a lot of stick.
Yeah.
People,
Yes. Endlessly.
People talking about Chelsea should pay £5 million not to sign him. That is a big conversation to have. And like the buying is 25 at max. I think it'll probably be, depending on where Chelsea finish, it could be 22 or whatever. I think this is a guy who...
So what did you put on your board?
I put underrated. I think this is someone who, for the last 5 or 6 years now, has had some of the biggest criticism of any player. Maybe not of any player, but is in the top 10 for most criticised players of the last 5 years. And probably, to a degree, rightfully so. Like, United came...
top 10 most criticised players over the last half a decade.
In the Premier
5
League.
years, yeah.
Well, since he was at
When he
United,
joined
since
United,
his
when he
second
joined
season.
United, and I get it, right?
Yeah.
He joined for a fee that should be one of the best players in the league, and he wasn't. He absolutely wasn't. I think what happens now is he's still tarnished with this, like, you were an £80 million winger. You're an £80 million winger.
Yeah.
He's not. Like, what will happen if Chelsea sign him? It looks like Chelsea will sign
It wasn't
him.
a crazy fee at the time.
He's a 20. He'll be a 22. No, it wasn't because Dortmund. He's amazing. He'll be a £22 million winger. That is quite tough to buy. And you mentioned earlier about like we spoke about Moreno. Okay, you guys were happy with him being a squad player for 30 million. Chelsea can get someone like Jadon Sancho, who might not be a starting winger, as one of their squad wingers for them going on to the future. This is someone who, when there have been aspects.
Yeah.
There have been times this season where you felt like he's kind of been back. He had that great time against Bournemouth, scored a good goal against Spurs, and Chelsea started well. Like I don't think it's a shock that as Chelsea have got worse, Jadon Sancho maybe dropped off on form. I think again he's been asked to do things slightly tougher than what his actual ability lets him do. He's not the quickest of wingers. He is somebody that when we are maybe. Or Enzo Maresca has asked him to try and chip in a bit more, shoot a bit more, and you can see that like he is such a confidence player. When he's got confidence, when he's enjoying his football, when Chelsea are kind of flying, I think he will also be someone that is good for them in that aspect. But when Chelsea are poor, I do understand. Can see him being a player that is more of a sideline player, someone that I don't think this is a Jadon Sancho now who's going to be grabbing the headlines, who's going to be the main player of a team anymore. But I think he could easily be a player who is someone that is part of the squad.
But
you do wonder. It's just like when he went back to Dortmund last year, and I know like his Champions League, I know he wasn't performing like at a super high level every week for Dortmund, but I mean that his performances in that Champions League run against PSG were like amazing, like, and it's just like really he should have just stayed there. Like
the spotlight, like I think he scored 2 goals for Borussia Dortmund in that 6 months he was there in the Bundesliga. Like if that happened in the Premier League in the 6-month period, I think the spotlight just burns. Which is my point about like people struggle to rate him, whether he's overrated or underrated, because when he's at Dortmund, people are saying, "What? Look at this! He scored 2 goals." I think if you applied those sort of things to the Premier League, people would be going, "Look at this!" But from the total flip perspective. So I think it's almost impossible to rate people's perceptions on Jadon Sancho because they're so split.
Yeah, that's because the majority of people that don't watch whole games of Bundesliga action. They watch a couple of highlights, and he looks quite good in highlights packages, but he drifts in and out of games so easily. He might be effective for 5 minutes, then completely go missing. I think he needs to move abroad. I think he needs to get away from English football, go to Liga, go to the Bundesliga, something like that, and just kind of reset. I don't think he's been as bad this season as people have made out, but there's no way that he is anything other than underrated at the moment, because people are I agree with Zach, pretty savage about him.
Yeah.
Like really pretty savage about him. And I get because he's very on massive wages when he went to United. There was attitude problems. He fell out with his manager. Yeah. But you listen to what Rafa Varane talks about Erik ten Hag. Erik ten Hag liked picking on one player at a time. He liked friction in the dressing room. And Sancho and Rashford were eventually his guys that he picked on. He's clearly a sensitive guy that just needs a little less media spotlight.
But I think it doesn't help though when you do comment like the thing we put on Rashford, freedom. It's not helping your case. No. It's not helping.
I think it's partly I think a result of like a generation of footballers who have been online throughout their entire lives, right? Like it's something that it's just the dynamic in which like young English, especially young English footballers existed now, and like maybe like poorly advised at times, whatever. Like, but I do think there's a running theme here. Like we've all these players. Like this is why they're like I've put underrated. These are all like English players. So at one point in their careers have been like held up on a pedestal as like the messianic figure of the future of English football. Like all of these players at one point were like, this is the future. This guy's going to win us a World Cup. Like and like throughout our lifetimes will then get torn down as soon as they have
we
a
build
poor
them up,
period.
don't we?
I think the difference with Sancho is that he has had like a poor 2 to 3 years now in the Premier League. I don't think there's any getting away from that. I agree with Dukes. Like I think he would be much happier, and he is clearly much happier when he's been playing abroad, specifically at Dortmund. Like even though his performances weren't amazing at Dortmund last year, you could see that he was a happier person at Dortmund. I think at Chelsea, I would still give him another year. I would honestly, if I was Chelsea, like you spent enough money on other players, I think you need depth in those areas. I would pay the 25 mil. Because like you say, Zach, it's not a huge outlay, and if he turns out to be a squad player, the only other thing is the wages, right? Like how much is Chelsea going to have to pay him wages? Like that could be a bit of a problem. But
yeah. On to true or false, guys. I'm going to say a statement. Write down true or false. Easy as that. First one. Spurs should sack Ange before next season starts.
I'm really intrigued about this actually. I think this might be this could be the best.
Because I also
debate.
get the other side.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. True-ish.
Ooh.
Cop out. Is it true?
Oh, I said true.
Okay.
But I'm not.
Joe putting false.
I think 100% true.
Joe, you kick off, mate.
I think we can look at this through a number of different lenses, right? This season has been pretty much a disaster for Ange. I think that's totally fair enough. And we can talk about the injuries, and we've talked about the injuries till we're blue in the face, right? But I think we have seen at points Ange football absolutely work over the last 18 months when things in the right position come together. I don't think a lot of the factors that have affected Tottenham this season have been in his control. I think the summer window, they definitely got a little bit wrong. I know they bought some really highly talented players, but they needed more, in my opinion. I think Daniel Levy's work with this squad and the building of this squad haven't been perfect by any means, and Ange has been in some way backed into a corner by his own playing style, right? Like, it's so high intensity, it's so fast paced that it does cause issues with injury and things like that. But when it works, and it has worked, it is really hard to play against. He's proven he can take a team that finished 8th the season before into that realms of being in the conversation for a top 4 spot in around that 5th place. And I don't want to offend Tottenham Hotspur fans here, and I be careful with my words here, but I think that's the best they can go for right now. Like, challenging for a Champions League spot is the best that Tottenham right now can hope for. I don't see a world in which they can compete for a title, compete for a major European Champions League honour. Like, I think Ange can make this club into a Champions League ready side. I don't see a level where the squad is ready to compete for titles, and I don't see a manager out there that can come in immediately and be like, do you know what? Man. I think I can compete for the top. I can compete for a title here.
No, I don't think that's what's expected of Ange though. Like, he is expected like Tottenham. I think
he's expected to compete for a Champions League.
Yeah, but they should be expected to be they should be expected to be one of the top teams in that race, right? And I know it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time in the Premier League now in terms of you've got Brighton, Villa, Newcastle, Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, although I do expect Nottingham Forest to drop off a little bit next season. But yeah, the competition's high, but nevertheless, I think Spurs need to be much higher in the same way that like Man United do.
I'm not disagreeing with that, and they can't lose 20 games again next season. This wouldn't be the case. But I think he's got enough rope from his first season to be able to survive this summer and be given another chance.
I don't know, man. I just think the managers who could be available this summer, like I just look at Araola, and I think the thing is, I do really like. I think Ange Postecoglou, when Spurs hired Ange Postecoglou, I was so behind it. I think even before they hired him, I was like, this is the kind of character that Spurs need. Bit of an underdog, someone who is not going to take any shit from the media, someone who is just going to be forthright with their playing style. I think Ange has got Spurs to a really good point, actually, especially in terms of the recruitment that's happened under him as well. Like, they're building a younger side, they're building a more dynamic side, they're playing exciting football once again, naive at points, of course. But I do think that lack of pragmatism and also just his visible frustration as well. I think someone like if Araola's on the table,
or Thomas Frank.
Thomas Frank, I think would just be hard
But
to
is
get
this
out
not
of
just
Brentford.
rinse and repeat, man? Is this not just rinse and repeat?
No,
I feel
because
like we've seen this with
I don't think so at all. I think
Ange isn't a defensive manager.
No.
I mean, going from Ange to Thomas Frank is
Thomas Frank is not a defensive manager.
Frank
though.
can do
He's
more.
more
Thomas-
defensive than Ange Postecoglou.
No, he's not. Like he played free flowing. If he's got the squad there.
Brentford are as attacking and free flowing as Spurs.
No, but no one is in the Premier League.
Well, exactly.
Like,
so that's my point.
But he's not. But he's not Antonio Conte. Like Thomas Frank with the right tools will play attacking football. Like he's getting Brentford Brentford should, like, under Tom, like when Thomas Frank leaves Brentford, they will get relegated the next season. I'm calling it right now. Like that squad is just not like, but like,
I don't know.
or at least
They're
they will
such
be.
a well-run club,
They'll,
mate. I
they'll,
think
they'll,
they'll
they'll be in a they would be in a relegation battle with an average manager. Like Thomas Frank is, I think, one of the top 5 managers in the league. But this is beside the point, though. I think Thomas Frank will be hard to get out of Brentford. Araola, I don't think would be that hard to get out of Bournemouth.
I think Frank's ready.
And I think both of them, like beyond playing style, I think both of them are more emotionally intelligent managers at just
What does
like
that mean?
dealing with things.
Emotionally intelligent managers. I think Ange has proved that he can be extremely emotionally intelligent in terms of his work with young players this season. I think it's actually been pretty solid. You know,
His media
to be able
work,
to get Archie Gray to play 30 plus games this season at centre half, and in the way he's managed to do it, I think it should be applauded to some level. I understand that Tottenham's season has not been good enough, absolutely, on the field, but he has faced massive adversity, and I know that Iraola is the talk of the town. I love Iraola, by the way. He is fantastic, but we're asking and saying Iraola could come and transplant that football from Bournemouth to Tottenham, the most high intense football, like Ange, in terms of his off-the-ball numbers. Nobody presses higher than Iraola, and we're saying, it's just transferable, he'll be able to do that. The injury problems this season at Tottenham have been so vast that if Iraola came in next season and played the same high-intensity football, I think you would see a lot of similar issues.
Playing a lot of
It's
games.
quite difficult for anyone to
Potentially.
succeed there as well. Like their wages to turnover is
Yeah.
like 40%,
Yeah.
and that is the lowest in
Exactly.
the Premier League by quite a distance. So Levy is clearly operating with
He
the
needs to
handbrake
invest.
on compared to how much they could spend. And expectations from Spurs fans, I think they want to be entertained. I think they want to challenge for European football. I think the trophy thing is actually something we talk about more as like fans of other clubs kind of ripping into them. I think they just want to see a balanced side that entertains them. And this year, there are factors outside of Ange's control. But they've also been very, very lost at points this season. Really lost. And it is all resting on a Europa League run where they've got to play Eintracht Frankfurt.
Yeah, of course.
Lazio's on the same side of the draw. And on the other side, they've got Athletic Club, Man United, Lyon. I find it very, very difficult to imagine Spurs winning the Europa League this year.
And
if they don't, the season has to go down as one of their worst in modern history. And Ange, it's very difficult to see him surviving.
I think my other thing with
I
it,
agree. I think it is difficult to see him surviving.
my other thing with it as well that I worry for them is what I think is be a really, really poor decision is to keep him on, give him the pre-season, start the new season, have the transfers with him kind of
It's the Ten
being
Hag paradox.
the man.
Yeah. Ten Hag
Exactly.
paradox.
And then you get to November and you go, oh, we've got to sack him now because we're still not improving. And then you bring in whoever it might be. Maybe it's Thomas Frank. I feel like he wouldn't join mid-season. Maybe it's Iraola. He'd probably be
But
gone
I
by
just-
that point. And then you've got one, worse managers available, and
I
two,
understand that.
they have no time to blend with the players.
I
And it's the
understand
Amorim
that completely, but I think there is a difference between what we saw. That is effectively the Eric Ten Hag conundrum, isn't it? And I think there is a difference between the reality of Ange and the reality of Ten Hag. Ten Hag, yes, had them 8th, and got the FA Cup and.
Spurs were
Fine,
quite handed
captain.
for that.
Yeah, fine. But the reality of Ten Hag was the underlying numbers had United finishing about 15th in the league, couldn't score goals, conceded a bucket load. The reality of Ange, even this season, is one of the best attacking outfits in the league. Score more goals, arguably, than any other side. I think that is something to hang your hat on. Yes, the defence has not been good enough, but I still think when Romero and Van der Ven are back, they've played this season with Ben Davis, Archie Gray at centre half for about 80% of the season. any
don't know
other
about that
side
much, but yeah, like it has been a lot.
would have struggled in that situation. When those two are back, I back Ange to be able to push for a Champions League spot.
I don't know. They're going to need a bit more transfer. But again, let us know in the
debate.
comments below,
Good debate.
guys. True or false? Enzo Maresca will be in charge of Chelsea at the end of next season. 3, 2, 1.
Ooh, Joe, I'm surprised.
True, false, false.
Like I'm not, but end of next season.
End of next
That's a
season.
That is a long time. Yeah, I was literally about to say exactly the same
It's
thing.
like 5 years, and a lot of players could be there. A lot of different players could be also leaving. I think what we'll hopefully see with the first manager to last more than one season under this new ownership is
Well, hold your horses there, mate. We're only in March. We're only in March.
Keep in mind, that reminds me, someone owes me a little bit of money.
A drunken bet.
Is that I think you might see a bit more squad cohesion, a little bit more of Chelsea knowing what they're doing on the pitch, and ultimately a Chelsea side that will improve on this season. Chelsea at times this season looked really, really good at the start of the year, and I think with Enzo Maresca, who I do think has made maybe some wrong decisions. I think at times Chelsea fans forget this is really a manager that's only in his second full season of senior management and having to deal with things that he's never dealt with before when he was even at Leicester, let alone when he was at Parma or the assistant manager of Man City. And so he is at times, I think, maybe having to learn on the job and develop with things. I also feel like, and from what you read, again, how much of that you believe, I don't know, that supposedly the ownership and the board are happy with him because to a degree, he is the guy that is not going to. He's not going to complain. He's not going to be like what Poch was, especially during the end. Like this time last year with Poch, you could tell things weren't quite gelling up there. You could tell he wasn't quite happy.
The results were good though.
The results were starting. Yeah, they were starting to be a bit more positive. Just before we lost 5-0 to Arsenal.
Maresca, this idea that he's a yes man and he's a company
yes man, but I think he's more so than what Poch was.
I don't necessarily. I don't really buy it. I think if you look at his back end of his Leicester side, he was definitely not a company yes man. He was kicking up a right fuss about transfers. Everything you hear behind the scenes at Chelsea is that he is very, very strongly voiced in not only just the squad but also the boardroom. I think he's highly respected at the club. I think the reason I've put True here is that the club have hung their hat on this guy. You know, when Stanley and Stewart, the sporting directors, who I think a lot of Chelsea fans want sort of questioned a little bit more than they are at the moment. He's their guy. He is their guy. When Stanley and Stewart, if they sack Enzo Maresca, where do they go? Because they've had 2 to 3 different choices now, and this has very much been our decision. We back.
But I think
on countless decisions they've made in terms of players.
It's different with the manager. It's different with the manager.
I feel like we had this conversation at the start of last season, the exact same conversation about Poch. It was like they can't afford to do, like they can't afford for this not to work out, so they will stick with him. Like
even more so this time.
Yeah, I guess it even, but I just think at Chelsea, the change is always in the winds. Like I feel like there's always this possibility, and all it takes is 2 months of either results going differently on the field or some disagreements taking place behind the scenes. I just think with Chelsea, I still don't have faith in a manager unless they are challenging for a title, which Chelsea haven't done this season. I didn't expect them to. I just think, end of next season, that's a long time. That's over a year away. I think there's a lot could change at Chelsea. And if Chelsea don't qualify even if Chelsea did qualify for the Champions League this year, but then we saw a bit of a drop off next year, I just fear, and I just think all it takes is four or five bad results at Chelsea. Things can get toxic around Stamford Bridge, and yeah, that's always my thinking with Chelsea. I think Maresca has done a fine job with Chelsea, but it's a difficult job. Like it's the hardest squad to work with in English football because it's so big, and I think he's done about as good a job as you could with it. But like, is that good enough given the money that Chelsea have spent in the last few years? Given where they want to be in the next few years, like I'm not so sure. And also, we talk about Ange and the managerial talent available. That same managerial talent is available to Chelsea. I think they'll probably stick with him this summer, but I can absolutely see Chelsea looking at the next shiny young manager next year, like and be like, he could do something with the squad.
I think the other thing as well though is like with Poch Poch was like, I'm an elite manager. I think he backed himself in the fact that he thought he was one of the best in the world. Like, he can go out and get any job.
Now he's losing. Now he's losing to Panama.
Exactly. Yeah, now he's losing to Panama. And so, whereas with Maresca, I think he also appreciates the opportunity he's in. Like, he's gone from a championship manager last season to now managing Chelsea. Like, whatever you think of Chelsea, that is one huge upgrade. And I think he realises that as well. And so, whereas someone like Poch last year, you could kind of tell was fed up or was willing to just call it quits and move on, I think with Enzo, he appreciates the position he's in and understands that, like, look, we need to get better, we need to move on. If results
I don't think Enzo's going to walk though. Like, I think it would.
You think it'll be a sacking rather than a?
Yeah, I think so. I think Maresca would, like, it's a huge job, but I don't think he's done quite enough yet to be like, oh, I can kind of pivot to another like club as big as Chelsea. Not right now. So, like, yeah, I do think. I mean, I guess he could maybe make the argument to go to Serie A and get a top job there, but I feel like in Serie A, clubs tend to play it safe, and they'd rather go for an Allegri than go for a Maresca. They'd rather go for Conte than go for Maresca. So even that's quite tough. I think he would try and cling on to it, but I think it's just the nature of the beast with Chelsea. Like, if you're not hitting like a very high standard, like going for a title, which Chelsea should be given the money that they've spent, then I think the cards are going to be stacked against you in the long term.
Yeah, I think he's done absolutely fine, but I've let my feelings known for years. I think Chelsea's squad building makes it very difficult for any manager to succeed there, to be honest. I think the project is going to go complete kaput before too long. I think he's done fine, but in a season where Man City have been really poor, in a season where Arsenal, by their own standards, have been really poor, Forest are in the Champions League spots, and Chelsea are competing for it into the final few weeks, having been within a couple of points of Liverpool in December time. Now they're in relegation form, and I don't think he should be fired at the end of this season, but can I imagine him being fired? If they miss out in the Champions League, absolutely. Whether that is fair or not. And looking forward, City are going to improve in the summer for sure. Rodri will be back. Arsenal are going to sign some players. Liverpool might lose some key players, but it's difficult to imagine them dropping out the top four. Then you've got Villa under a better manager a more experienced manager and better manager.
He's a better manager
than Maresca. Newcastle on a high with Eddie Howe. Like, there are so many clubs competing for fourth that it is very difficult to imagine Chelsea being nailed on for it, and then his job becomes, at the end of his second season, pretty untenable.
Okay.
And Ruben's Reds are going to be breathing down the necks come next season as well.
All right, out of the fantasy world.
True or false, Amorim will succeed with Man United next season. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, that's nice,
true.
isn't it? Wow. I think everyone is being very like, I've said true, like, but partly because I'm a United fan, I just hope it happens, and I do like him. But I'm kind of surprised because I think that, like, there's still a lot at United, a bit like with Chelsea. There's a lot at United that can go wrong for a manager, even if what
is succeed.
Exactly.
Will they improve?
I think they'll finish
absolutely.
Well, yeah.
I think they'll finish higher, and ultimately that's like. Success is.
And I think
success.
Jim Ratcliffe interview have lowered expectations quite dramatically. Like, people have realised the financial issues they're having. People have realised how difficult it is on the back of 10 years of failure. Man United, I think, will trend in the right direction next year if they get a few key additions, trim the fat from the squad, and he is. I think he's an amazing speaker. And I really do believe in his charisma and his ability to turn it around. So I think they will improve. Will they finish in the top 5? Maybe not. But could they be in the conversation for Europa League, which on the back of this year, I think would be considered succeeding?
Yeah,
kind of. But I just think, yeah, I guess so. Like, United, it depends how much money United actually end up having to spend this summer. Like, we do forget last summer, and I know Amorim wasn't there, but United spent a lot of money on pretty quality players and succeed now players. But they are picking up, but it's just
like De Ligt last few months. I think Mazraoui's been a good addition. Xerxes is not a goal scorer, but I think he's a very good player. Like, it wasn't as bad a summer as people are making out.
Oh, no, well, yeah, no, I don't think so either. But it was still a bit of a mishmash, especially given that those players were bought for the previous manager, and Amorim now. We just don't know how many reinforcements he's going to have in the summer. I still worry about the striker position. I worry a lot about the midfield. Like, there's still, like, I have said true here because but it is kind of mainly hope. Like, I think there's a lot, and I like the manager. Like, I think he's been dealt a difficult hand. there's still a lot that could go wrong, I think. But yeah, I've got a lot of faith. I've got a lot of faith, and I think United, if they do click and there aren't too many injuries, that starting 11, if they get a decent striker in and they get a decent midfielder in and they get a decent right wing back in, then I think they should be looking to challenge the top 6 and potentially even have an unlikely top 4 challenge. Like I think the United squad is better than people make out. Like it has underperformed horribly for the last 2 years, like given the actual quality that is in there.
You in agreement?
Are you blind faith, or are you?
I think United have improved a little bit in the last month or so. I think there's been
We have
a bit
been
of
playing some pretty bad teams though. Like
Yeah.
I think you have to caveat that.
Yeah, fine, but I think that there has been a little bit of a shift in Ruben Amorim's style. I think this sort of narrative of he's really one-dimensional, Amorim. He's not going to willing to change at all. I think he's an absolute load of nonsense.
He's tried so many things.
I think over the last 6 weeks, he's really shifted up in style. Yes, the formation on paper might be very similar, but United playing in a very, very different way to when he first arrived and how he had his sporting team set up. It's effectively a low block United are playing at the moment, and it's really working. I think the addition of Dorgu has definitely added something to the side, and he's actually shown an ability to adapt his own style to suit the players. Casemiro, when he first came into the club, you thought this is the end of Casemiro. I think over the last month or so, his ability to change Casemiro's style of play, position, closeness between him and the midfielders, closeness between him and the centre-backs has actually improved Casemiro's game again. So I think that there is definite signs of him learning. He's still a very young coach and he's kind of adapting in the moment. I think if he continues that learning curve, United add the right players to suit the new system in the summer. I think there's a very realistic chance next season is positive United.
I think he's been helped by the fact that Bruno's gone on a kind of legendary.
But I think
run.
he needs some props for that.
For sure.
I think
for
he needs
sure.
some props
But,
for deciding
like,
to play
has
Bruno
been,
deeper into the
one of
midfield.
the best player at the club, who's consistently delivered. And after a slowish start to the season, Bruno has. I think it's gone under the radar. Bruno's
Yeah, but I think that is partly, again, you say slower start to the season. I think that's because Amorim has learned how Bruno wants to play. He's dropped him even deeper. He's playing effectively as a number 8. You can shuttle box to box, and that's allowed Bruno way more freedom to get on the ball and dictate.
It wasn't a slight against
games.
Amorim. It was more just giving a shout out to Bruno.
But also Bruno, we do also forget that he is in great form right now. At the start of the season, Bruno was in the worst form of his Man United career. Like he was really for the first time ever, I was like, oh god, Bruno is actually not good right now. I don't think you could really argue that Bruno was ever not good at United at any point before that. So I think there should be a little bit of caution there. But equally, if Amorim has played a blinder with him, especially given that Ahmad's injury as well. He was really the only talismanic figure in this side.
Really well.
The fact that United have have improved without Ahmad being there to win games on his own, I think has been really good.
And five centre-back injuries. No
massive.
wing-backs. The striking issues United have got. Mason Mount's missed the entire season. Shaw's not started the game in over a year. There are so many issues around Man United that are happening on the field before you get into the off the field. I think he's done well.
That's where I worry a little bit. I do think Amorim, the Højlund job is massive for him, and I do worry. I think you look at Højlund right now, I know he scored against Leicester, so hopefully that can be a springboard, but generally speaking has looked so bereft of confidence, has looked really, really frustrated in general, even when he's warming up on the touchline. He's a young, very talented player who cost a lot of money. I think
But United are going to sign a striker in the summer, to support Højlund.
Probably, but
probably about it. They're definitely going to.
They definitely will, but how much money are they going to dedicate to that? And how much and how many clubs are they going to have to beat to get to their top targets as well? Lots of clubs need a striker this summer. Liverpool do, Arsenal do. Chelsea do. Potentially. They probably do. Villa.
Yeah,
as a backup to Watkins, but I don't know whether Villa will be going into the top tier there. But I think it's going to be tough. I think the striker market is going to be super, super tough this summer. It might be that United have to settle for not that he's a bad player, but they might have to settle for Jonathan David. But I don't know.
Jonathan David would be a great signing.
He probably would. But I think there are a lot of question marks about him and why a top club hasn't come in for him so far. But I think that's the one. That's the one thing I worry with Amorim, because I just don't want the Højlund situation to get any more toxic than it has done, and I think that's a difficult one for him.
Well, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys have enjoyed that debate. Please get into the comments. Let us know what your thoughts, feelings, and opinions are, like who you think debated very, very well, or you agreed with, or whatever it might be. Guys, if you want to check out the boys, McCubbin, where can they find you? Maybe say to that one.
Lowdown, me and Diggs, every Thursday on Sky Sports Premier League. Yeah.
You've got your own podcast as well?
I do, yeah. It's called The Truth. It goes out every Friday. It's myself and Sam Ty, football journalists. It's a lot of fun. Check it out.
Joe Tomlinson, you have your own YouTube channel. We'll be linked down below. What do you do?
Yeah, just the same stuff as usual.
Exactly, exactly. And of course on Sky Sports. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you later this week for the podcast. Lots of love. Bye.